Hello, it's 4 o'clock in Berlin, and I'd like to welcome you. I'm Ulrich Dirnagel. I'm the secretary of the Einstein Foundation Award for Promoting Quality in Research, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's session. This is an exciting opportunity to meet the 2024 winners, as well as their nominators, and to learn more about their outstanding achievements, goals, and the challenges they face. Today, we gather to celebrate remarkable contributions that aim to strengthen the integrity and reliability of scientific research through the Einstein Foundation Award for Promoting Quality in Research. This award recognizes the often overlooked yet crucial efforts that ensure research is not only groundbreaking, but also trustworthy and reproducible. Sadly, these efforts are frequently underappreciated and underfunded, and there is a widespread assumption that scientific research is inherently reliable and that it self-corrects over time. With this award, we aim to challenge that assumption and bring attention to those who are actively working to improve research quality. We are proud to support these important projects with a total of 500,000 euros, and today we will hear more about the incredible work these winners are doing and what they hope to achieve in the future. This is the fourth year we are presenting this prestigious award, which is jointly awarded by the Einstein Foundation Berlin and the Quest Center for Responsible Research at the Berlin Institute of Health at Charité. A big thanks to the Wibben Stiftung Wissenschaft and the State of Berlin for their generous support, without which this prize would not be possible. We are also deeply grateful to our esteemed partners, Nature, PLOS, the US National Academy of Sciences, the Max Planck Foundation and Society, and the Berlin University Alliance. Together, we emphasize that transparency, replicability, and robustness are not just ideals, but must be at the core of research culture. With that, I'm thrilled to introduce our exceptional panel. We are warmly invited, you're warmly welcome to join the discussion by sharing your questions in the chat. I'll be happy to pose selected questions to the panelists. Please note that this session will be recorded. And now, without further ado, I'm pleased to hand over the session to today's moderator, Jess Rohmann, an epidemiologist and dedicated advocate for responsible research. Jess is a research fellow at the Institute of Public Health at Charité, Universitätsmedizin Berlin, and at the Quest Center. So welcome, Jess, and please take over.
Many thanks for this introduction, and good afternoon. Thanks to everyone also from my side for joining us today to celebrate these truly remarkable achievements of our winners here with us on the panel. It's a privilege to be here alongside this group of really inspiring individuals and organizations who, as Uli mentioned, are shaping the future of research integrity, transparency, and rigor. So I'm happy to introduce in a bit more detail the awardees and their nominators. Actually, these nominators will then introduce the awardees in more detail, and they will specifically highlight aspects of their impactful work and what they're doing to promote quality in science, the reason behind these awards in the first place. So first, we have with us today Christopher Schmied from the FMP Berlin and Helena Jambor from the Kur University of Applied Scientists. These are the recipients of the Early Career Award for the PixelQuality project. Yeah, thank you for waving. Perfect. Next, we have Brandon Stell on behalf of PubPeer for the Institutional Award. Brandon is the founder of this innovative platform for post-publication peer review. And we're also joined by PubPeer's nominator, Dorothy Bishop from the University of Oxford. There's Dorothy as well here on the panel. And finally, we have Elisabeth Bik, a scientific integrity Sherlock, one could say, who's been awarded the individual award, and her nominator, Csaba from the University of Fribourg. Welcome to you as well. Thank you for joining us. So I'd like to start with you, Csaba. With your background in both medicine and pharmacology, you've held key academic and leadership positions across the US and Europe, and you currently serve as chair of pharmacology at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland. Your work bridges pharmacology, cell biology, and translational science, and you were recently listed as one of the top 400 most influential biomedical scientists in the world. So big question for you in this position. And as the person who nominated Elisabeth Bik for the individual award, you clearly see something truly special in her specific work. Can you tell us about a particular moment or project where her commitment to research integrity was especially evident?
Okay, well, I'm so happy that this actually came about and you decided to award her. And as you mentioned, I am not a research integrity person per se. I am a scientist. I do research in the lab. We are trying to find things, discover things. And so if you go back, the first time I came across research integrity problems or solutions or people who are looking into this was actually 10 years ago. And we just mentioned this before this video call. It was this thing called sciencefraud.org, a website that Paul Brooks started, and it was very swiftly shut down. He started it anonymously. People went after him. He got ridiculed. He almost got fired. He got lawsuits out of it. All he did was exposed problematic papers and problematic institutions. So that was the end of that. And after that, PubPeer came about, and I guess we'll talk about that later, how that resulted in this revolution. And there were all these investigators on PubPeer, mostly anonymous. And after Paul Brooks, it was obvious why people didn't want to go with their own names. They came up with these funky names like Cheshire and Aneuris Inconstant and whatnot. So those were starting to put out problematic papers, mainly about image manipulation. And then one person kept coming up. And when you started to look into PubPeer or just follow the literature or later the website, Elisabeth Bik's name kept coming up. Elisabeth found this, Elisabeth exposed that, Elisabeth thinks this lab is putting out suspicious stuff. It was Elisabeth, Elisabeth, Elisabeth. And she was really maybe the only one who did this with her own name and institution and the website. And it was not anonymous. And it was also not inflammatory. Many of those other people, if they couldn't attack them on the content, they could always attack them on style because they were a little bit rough. Elisabeth was always over the board, very firm, but down to the subject matter, not outside the subject matter, but still fearless and very productive, and hundreds and thousands of papers. And you ask specific examples. I mean, paper mills producing hundreds of fake papers for sale. I'm not going to mention names, but very famous professor at the University of California system was investigated, found out serial problems. Then there was a Nobel laureate on the other coast. Serial problems, many problematic papers resulted in many retractions. A French virologist, I'm not going to mention. I think he is suing her right now. So it's not one thing. It's the massive amount of fearless work. And there's one more thing about Elisabeth. I don't want to we can talk about this later, but many of these other investigators are working under the radar. Elisabeth is always in the spotlight, and she has achieved the status where actually people are asking her now to look into things. So Nature does an investigation, and Nature asks her, okay, Elisabeth, can you please take a look at these articles? Or some institution is looking into this, and they ask her to provide an independent review. And she's writing review articles on the subject in peer-reviewed journals. So totally over the board, and it's very, very hard to dismiss her, and it's very, very, very hard to disagree with her. It's very factual, quality is superb, and is just really at the top of the line. So you can call her a wrecking ball, an icebreaker, a battering ram, a pioneer. I just call her one of my heroes, okay? She is one of my heroes. And one more thing. So I got into this a little bit more last year when I wrote a book about the reproducibility crisis. Actually, it's not out yet. And then I really, really got into how much work she did, because I didn't know all of it. But once you get into it, it's massive. It's just amazing amount of work. I don't know how she does it. I don't know how she keeps up with it, but very, very impressive. And I'm so happy that this award came about. And now I shut up.
Thank you so much. I think that was an incredible introduction, and I just want to add a few small words before turning it over to you, Elisabeth, for those who maybe don't know your background as well. And I love this this classification as a fearless hero, very much in the spotlight. But of course, that wasn't the first thing. You didn't start off in the spotlight. You started off as a microbiologist who has now evolved into this role of the renowned scientific integrity consultant. And I think your roots are important, and your story is a very integral part of what led you to be who you are today. I'm sure you'll talk a bit more about this, but you began your career in the Netherlands. And after, I think 2001, you moved to Stanford University, shifting your focus to studying the microbiome. And it was during this time that you became concerned with image duplications, and you spent your free time uncovering manipulations, which you found astonishingly frequent. So it was this observation that led you to found your popular blog, for those who aren't familiar, the Microbiome Digest, where you raise awareness about scientific figure manipulations. And of course, you do this also on social media. And since 2019, you've dedicated yourself full-time to this task, working as a data detective. And without the security, I think it's important to say, and protection of a fixed and paid position to do that, and a significant personal costs, also in terms of attacks, defamation, and legal complaints, which you share very openly when you give presentations about your work. So I guess all of that being said, my question to you is, as the recipient of this prestigious award, how do you think it will influence how your colleagues or the broader research community as a whole perceives the importance of research integrity? And do you believe it could inspire others to take a similar stand, as Csaba mentioned, in the public eye? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. And thank you, Dr. Szabo, for nominating me. I think this award is so important for recognizing the work on science integrity, which, as we already heard, often leads to harassment online, nasty emails, death threats, lawsuits, what have you not. So having this recognition and science doesn't really recognize this effort very often. There's a lot of science awards for doing great research, but for the work that we do, which is criticizing other research papers, that there's very few awards. So this is an enormous recognition for my work, and yeah, just a big thank you for all of that. How will it influence? I think I hope to inspire a lot of young folks that this is a career, this is an important part of research, that if you work in a lab where there's a bully who almost forces you to change the results, tweak the results, Photoshop, that is not good, that you should stand up for that. And the broader research community, I just hope that folks at journals, publishers, institutions will take this work more seriously and realize that it is actually quite okay to retract a paper. I would actually see a journal that retracts a paper as a better journal than a journal or an institution who wants to keep these things under their wraps, who want to keep these things secret. All too often we see that journals and institutions do not seem to take action when we raise concerns like the ones I raise. And they see us as troublemakers. They see us as they harass us and sue us, like I said. And to have awards like this tells them that actually research integrity is important. It's a essential part of what science should be. And yeah, again, thank you for having this award, and Dr. Szabo for nominating me.
I'm so happy that you got it.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back to several of the points that you brought up in the discussion. I want to now introduce Dorothy Bishop, a second nominator we have with us here today. Dorothy, you're a British neuropsychologist. You're an emeritus professor at the University of Oxford and a fellow of several prestigious institutions, including the Royal Society. And beyond these academic achievements, you're an advocate who's well known for open science and research reproducibility. You served, among other things, as the inaugural chair of the UK Reproducibility Network's advisory board, and you're a founding member of Reproducible Research Oxford. The UKRN even established a prize in your name for early career researchers promoting open research practices, and you're a founding member of the jury of the award we're celebrating today. So thank you also for that. Given your extensive contributions to research quality, you're a leading voice in advancing research integrity. And keeping this in mind, I would like to ask you, nominating a platform for an institutional award is a significant step. What is it about PubPeer's approach to research integrity that prompted you to put them forward for this recognition? And in your view, what makes their commitment to transparency and accountability stand out in such a powerful way?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just an institution that if they didn't exist, we'd have to invent them now, because those of us who are interested in particularly uncovering research misconduct of various kinds, this platform is absolutely invaluable. Now, it didn't start off with that as an aim, actually. So I'm old enough to remember the days prior to there being anything like PubPeer around. And in those days, people thought of publishing as like a sort of a single step thing that you did. And once the paper was published in a peer-reviewed journal, that was it. It had been deemed okay, and nobody could say anything about it. In rare cases where people wanted to critique a published paper, what you had to do was to write a letter to the editor, and the editor might or might not agree that some journals didn't even have this process, and those that did might sit on it or send it out for peer review, and some months later, something might appear, but there was no possibility for very active to and fro or for very prompt comments. Whereas PubPeer is very immediate, and it allows you to very rapidly respond to a published paper. And there's really no other mechanism for doing that in this sort of way. When it first came out, much as Szaba was saying about the business with Elisabeth's early writings and so on, and the prior attempts to do these things have been problematic, there was a lot of criticism with people saying, well, it's like the Wild West, anybody can comment and people may use it maliciously. But in fact, and particularly since you can be anonymous, but actually they've been careful to make sure there's very strong moderation. So you can't sort of write on PubPeer that so-and-so is a fraudulent bastard or something like that. You have to sort of say, in this paper, this is what is said, or here's an image that they produce, here's a problem with it. You have to be very objective. And that helps keep the temperature down, but it also means it has to be verifiable. And the authors always are invited to reply, and they may sometimes point out the problem isn't there. But more often than not, that there is an issue that has been picked up that is an important one. And so what we now have is actually an archive of post-publication peer review, which has built up over many years. This is invaluable if you are interested in identifying cases of misconduct or fraud, because very often you can't make those judgments on the basis of a single published article. But what you see in the people who are problematic is a pattern. So you see a pattern of the same sorts of problems recurring over the time. So although all of us, including me, will make innocent errors, I've had to correct papers in my time where I did something stupid in terms of, making a mistake in a table. Where PubPeer comes into its own is where there are serial offenders, and quite often these are people involved as well in paper mills, which is a recent phenomenon that we're really struggling to get a grip with. It's absolutely invaluable. And they've done it all with very limited resources. So I'm delighted they've got this prize, so they'll have more resources and hopefully be able to do more things. But they basically, really, I think, heroes, again, we're talking about heroic behavior, because they are ensuring that science can meet the highest standards and making the published record a much more reliable foundation on which to build future work. And I'm delighted that they've got this prize. And the other thing I will just say is, so are people on social media. I've seen an incredibly strong reaction, to the whole panoply of Einstein Awards this year in a way that I haven't seen in previous years. That when it was announced, people were saying, great, this is superb. Doesn't mean that the previous years, of course, weren't also superb, but this is very popular with the masses, shall we say, because I think a lot of people do use PubPeer and also are very well aware of Elisabeth Bik's comments on PubPeer and so on. So I think people are very impressed with this award and delighted with it, as I am.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, for sharing this. And Brandon, before you became a crowd favorite, let's say you were born in the US, as you worked as a neuroscientist, and you've been conducting research in France since 2008. You co-lead the cerebellar neurophysiology team at the Université Paris-Cité. Oh, I'm going to butcher that. In 2012, you co-founded PubPeer with web developer George Smith and his brother Richard Smith, remaining anonymous until 2015. Then you revealed your identity to secure funding for the project, which triggered quite some media coverage since the platform became more and more important. And this leads me to my question here. Creating a platform like PubPeer to facilitate post-publication review and enhance the research knowledge base is no easy task, for sure. I wonder, what were some of the key challenges you faced in launching PubPeer, and who or what motivated you to pursue such an ambitious project that was certainly destined to face some resistance? Second part of the question, looking forward, how do you see this award helping to broaden the platform's impact and strengthen its role further in the research community?
Well, first of all, thank you very much to the Einstein Foundation for this amazing award, and to Dorothy for this nomination and the wonderful introduction. You've left very little for me to say about the website now. But I think this award is going to make a big difference to the website. The overarching motivation of the site many years ago was just to add an additional layer of evaluation to research publications. At the time, it was, and it still is the case, a journal name has an undue influence on evaluation of research and scientists. And this reliance on journal name has created most of the problems, if not all of the issues we see with science today. We're kind of tied to non-open access publishing because we're so addicted to journal name. There's a lack of innovation in publishing models. We're still using the PDF. And of course, many suspect research integrity practices arise because of this. There's an incentive to kind of tidy things up enough to get them into the journal, because that's kind of the end of the story. Once it's in the journal, you get the promotion or you get the grant. So the original goal of the site was just to capture the conversations that researchers have about articles on a daily basis and make them available to, everyone, including evaluation committees. And we thought that by providing this information about the content of the article, it would be used instead of, or in addition to, journal name. So people, the goal was to really focus on the content of an article. The website has taken off. Our biggest struggle is still to kind of capture that sort of detailed analysis by scientists. The sort of analysis that we have in journal clubs, because we think that if we can capture that sort of conversation, that's going to make the site even more powerful. If we can take the focus off of journal name and put it on the content, and if all scientists kind of contribute to that, that's going to have a real impact on those other issues that I listed. And so this award from the Einstein Foundation will be a great help for that. One, because it shows that prestigious institutions value the commentary on the site, and that may help inspire scientists to leave more of that sort of commentary. And two, the award money will allow us to develop new ideas that we have to attract more commentary other than just research integrity issues.
Thank you very much. I think also a lot of points there we can come back to. So just a reminder also to our listeners, if you have some concrete questions to our panelists today, feel free to already start entering those in the chat. So now I want to go over back to our host, actually, to Uli Diernagel. As the award secretary, you were directly involved in the jury selection process for the Early Career Award. And I wonder what aspects of the PixelQuality's teamwork made them particularly deserving of this award, which seeks to promote research quality, and which elements of their project stood out to you as particularly impactful. What potential do you see in their work to drive improvements specifically on quality integrity in the future?
Sure. But allow me to begin by saying that PixelQuality was chosen after extensive and rigorous deliberations by the jury, as all 5 projects were exceptionally high quality and truly deserving of recognition. I also want to emphasize that the jury's decision on the early career researcher projects was entirely independent on the fact that forensic imaging analysis, along with a platform for discussing its results, was a major focus of this year's individual or institutional awards. But the jury had to make a decision at some point, and PixelQuality emerged as the winner for several compelling reasons. And just to name a few, I mean, it's an internationally active bottom-up initiative that has already established highly visible guidelines for publishing clear and understandable image data derived from microscopy experiments. The initiative is now focusing on implementation and also sustainability, including the development of educational resources, trainer-the-trainer programs, and strategic alliances with global training initiatives aimed at scientists, publishers, funding bodies. And additionally, and very timely, I think it's addressing the challenges and the opportunities associated with integrating artificial intelligence into the analysis workflows of AI-generated scientific figures. So I think it was a hard decision for the jury, but I think one that is well-deserved, obviously.
Thanks a lot. And for those of you who don't know Helena and Christopher yet, I'd just like to give a quick introduction, a little bit about each of them. Helena, you're a biologist and RNA scientist with research experience at EMBL, Max Planck, and the University Hospital Dresden. You're now working as an associate professor at the Chur University of Applied Sciences. I'm sure I said that wrong as well. I'm sorry about that. And over the years, your research has turned you into a specialist in biological and medical data visualization. You've become a trainer and consultant for life science-specific data visualization. And Christopher, you're a senior research data scientist at the Leibniz Institute for Molecular Pharmacology and the lead data scientist at EU OpenScreen, which is a nonprofit European research infrastructure consortium. And your expertise lies in the analysis, processing, acquisition, storage, and management of scientific image data, which is essentially making sense of complex images in the research world. So together, it's clear you're both deeply immersed in this fascinating world of research image data. And also from my side, congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. I'm wondering if you can tell us more about how this project came to be and the journey you've been on together to get to this point. Specifically, what were some of the key obstacles that you faced along the way? And what advice might you give others who are working to drive change in this early career space and improve research quality? Thanks.
Maybe I can start with the first part, how it came about very briefly, and then Christopher can talk about the obstacles. So we share this question. So how it came about, I mean, there are always many beginnings to every project, right? So you have to start it and restart it again and again and again. And I think one of the pivotal moments for me in this project was in my postdoc, I gathered a lot of microscopy data myself. And having a background in art and design, I always particularly liked the idea of selecting, how that selection works for a figure, right? That's the transformation process. And because I was thinking about it and developing teaching units for my colleagues at the Max Planck in Dresden, etc., I started to realize that this is not something that anyone really learns in most graduate programs. So we learn how to operate a microscope and we learn how to technically prepare the samples, but we are rarely taught how to turn this data then into a figure. And then I had the lucky opportunities to spend a sabbatical in Berlin, orienting myself in a career. And I was stumbling upon, I was reading more articles in scientific journals. I had more time for that. And I realized that in many of the journals, even like Nature Science level, that the figures were not ideal, let's say. So they sometimes were lacking scale bars, or they were lacking annotations. It was unclear where an insert came from, or color blindness was not observed, etc. So they were like very obvious and very simple mistakes that could hinder the appreciation sometimes of the actual data. And then many years later, I mean, I kept on talking about this, that this is an issue. And at some point, there was an initiative formed where we had the opportunity to screen this systematically in journals. And that was, I think, the first publication where we published that just the numbers, how prevalent is a missing scale bar in physiology or in plant science or in cell biology. And these numbers kind of gave us the ammunition to actually start a group work on dealing with this. And Christopher and I know each other for a long time. He was a PhD student in the group that I did a postdoc, so we already were familiar with each other's work, and we had moved on, but we kept in touch. So then our quick Corona project, we were both at home, stuck with nothing much to do. And I said, let's do a quick cheat sheet. Like, let's make little cheat sheets where I explain people how to make figures and you explain how to make them with Fiji, with an open source processing software. And these two cheat sheets we then turned into a paper, because why not? And they became really, really popular. And then we realized that our opinion is not really that valid, right? It's an opinion of two people, but actually to turn these guidelines that we came up with into solid guidelines for a scientific community, you really need a community work. And that's where we then rejoined our forces really, really in a big effort to develop the community guidelines for publishing image and also image analysis. And yeah, so that's how and we still work on that, right? Obviously, we continue working on this. So this is very fruitful collaboration.
Yeah, with the key obstacles, I want to pick up this community aspect, right? Because internally, different perspectives. I think one issue is defining a common language and being open to do that. Because if you're an expert, you might reject ideas of other people quite easily. But I think in this community work, to find this, it took us a long time discussing what the problem is, how to address it, and how to speak about it. I think this was a key obstacle, and to overcome this, you have to be open-minded, and bring in these perspectives and find them. And it can be quite a long journey to reach this language where we understand each other. And towards the outside, I believe, I think it was a bit hard for people to understand what we wanted to achieve initially. And we had to really define the problem clearly, and what we wanted to change and what the contribution would be. And obviously, right, you also get resistance, right? Because what we want to stress, right, because scientists at large, they're working very hard, right? And this is also a scientific world is also difficult, right? It's filled with a lot of uncertainty, right? And to put more on top of that can lead to, I would say, resistance, right? So here the key for our work, right, was to make it clear and also easy to implement, right? And explain it in a way that many people from many different perspectives can really understand it. And that's why we choose the format, for instance, for these checklists. We didn't want to make it legal language with we really wanted to give them something in the hand that fits on 2 A4 pages, that is easy to implement and on clear enough to be easily implementable. Because there's many different people doing microscopy, right, from many different backgrounds. So, and I think
to making good and clear and transparent figures that are reproducible, this is not something easy. That's why we also want to now invest in this project, and that's the fantastic opportunity we get to further develop this concept and really develop training material, right? That we can really, because the checklists and the guidelines, they are right, they are limited space, so we cannot explain very long what you have to do, right? And this award really gives us this opportunity to expand on that. And I think it's also important to really be balanced and have a compromise. And we try to achieve that with different levels, right, in our checklists. So you have a minimum standard where you are not so controversial. So there's still some improvement. And then we try to give them a goalpost with our further levels, with the recommended level and then also the ideal level. So maybe they can find something to strive toward to improve the quality. Yes, these were the obstacles.
Thank you both very much. So now I'd like to open it up for a discussion. So just as a reminder, Uli already has his hand up because there was an audience question. So he'll be bringing in the perspectives from the audience. Feel free to drop questions, comments, and thoughts there. And the panelists, I would just ask that you also raise your hand, and then I'll just call on you to answer. So we've got our first question. Uli, let's hear it from you.
Yes, and it's actually a question by Rainer Kohlemann, and I think it's a question to all the winners. You're being honored today for a great job. How much hostility do you face from the scientific community, or are you already in a position where your work is generally recognized and accepted? Who wants to get a stab on that?
Helena, sure.
Unmute. I can just start with an easy one because we don't have much hostility at all, and very, very, very much unlike Elisabeth and Brandon. One thing that we did was to build the community before releasing our work, right? So we have behind us 500 scientists that are joined in the QuaRep, and we spent a lot of time on bringing them all on board beforehand, making sure that everyone is in agreement. So just doing a lot of footwork before publishing these guidelines, which is why afterwards we were really positively surprised to not get much backlash at all.
So you really had a participatory approach to help the uptake.
A lot of time online.
Elisabeth, you had a different experience, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, that is, yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of resistance still today, even though I do think there's in general, a big support for the work I do. I still have lots of nasty messages on Twitter, X, from people who are fans of the folks whose work I've criticized. I've been the topic of articles written in conspiracy theory newsletters, newspapers. I'm featured on a couple of Reddit posts, and not in a positive way. People will tear my whole life apart, like the companies I've worked at, or my papers that I've published in the past. How do I look? Where do I live? There's a lot that they criticize, and it's a continuous stream of nastiness. I just switched to Blue Sky just to, I gave up. Like, I'm not gonna be open to that negativity that constantly is sent my way. I've also been the victim, I guess, of legal stuff, legal threats. So the French professor whose work has already been mentioned has filed a legal complaint against me. Luckily, that was dismissed. But, there was 3 years of anxiety. And there have been, I've been subpoenaed, I've had cease and desist letters. And it's, the first cease and desist letter is very scary if you get that. And then later you sort of get used to it, I guess. But there's a continuous threat of me being sued, and I'm just doing this work by myself. And as part of I was part of one of the founders, I guess, of a legal in the Scientific Integrity Fund, where we have some amount of money to help folks like me who are being threatened with who have to hire legal counsel to help them with their finances, because I think most of us scientists don't have the money to hire a lawyer, and it's very expensive, especially in the US. So I hope to also use part of perhaps all of the money that I've won for a fund like this, like to help others do the work they do. I don't do this to become rich, but I also, of course, don't want to lose everything I have in some legal battle. So definitely a big risk that all of us who work in this space continuously experience day to day.
Thanks a lot, Elisabeth. Yeah, I guess that wasn't part of your curriculum when you took your master's courses, how to deal with lawsuits and so on. Okay, so learning by doing. And Brandon, you also have had some experience in this domain, negative, I guess.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on to what Elisabeth said. So, I mean, one thing that I need to say is that I'm accepting this award on behalf of PubPeer, the website, but it's really an award to the users and the people who made the website and the content on the website. And so, although I myself have not ever been, I don't feel personally attacked by the website among my colleagues or anything like that. We have received some like legal letters and lawsuits that are fairly minor, and that's uncomfortable. But that is one of the major reasons that we allow anonymity on the website, is because the users are more of a target of those sort of attacks than we are. And so the anonymity is really there because we're totally conscious of the fact that writing a comment about a scientist can cause a legal threat, but it also can cause an uncomfortable situation if it's somebody who has a higher level in science than you do.
Maybe if I could just interject, because I know we do have some early career listeners with us today. This is probably a particular concern to early career researchers who I guess all of you would like to motivate to engage with your initiatives and platforms. So do you have some advice for them? I mean, like you said, working then sometimes under an anonymous name or a fake name to give this kind of feedback, but still engaging with it. Would you say that that's kind of a stepping stone, getting others to support? Do you have other suggestions for early career researchers?
So like I said at the beginning, I really think that creating a body of evaluation in addition to journal name can really make major changes in science for all of these different types of issues. And it's really important that younger scientists take part in this. And so my advice is to take part of it in any way you can, because contributing to this body of information, this is going to be used by evaluation committees, and you're going to prefer to be evaluated by your peers than you are by journal editors who are deciding whether or not your article is published in an individual journal. And so do what you can to participate. And if that means, if you're more comfortable using anonymity, then go ahead and do that. And, like you mentioned, we do have guardrails to make sure that comments, or like Dorothy mentioned, we do have guardrails to make sure that comments are productive, even if they're anonymous.
Thanks a lot. Maybe before we go to the next question, Uli, I just go over to Csaba first.
Just a small comment to Brandon, that, people criticize all the time the anonymity in PubPeer. But look at what happened. There was this thing called PubMed Commons that was tried by the NIH. And it failed after a few years because that was something where people had to do it by name. And there was hardly any users. And it was a very, very, unfortunate effort. And that shows that anonymity is actually a core element of what you guys are doing. And no matter if people criticize it, that is the only way this can work, unfortunately or not, but that's the way it is. And so the other thing has been tried already. And so this is the only way, I guess.
Absolutely. It's a shame that PubMed Comments didn't work, and it shows that there's a big demand for anonymous commentary. And anonymous PubPeer, I think, has shown that anonymous commentary can be very productive. I mean, I'm very confident that 99.9% of the comments on PubPeer are productive and accurate. And anonymity hasn't allowed that to become the Wild West and a major problem like everybody was saying, or many people were saying on Twitter in the early days of PubPeer.
Thanks a lot. Uli, next question.
Yeah, I have one from John C. And he says that thank you so much for the Einstein Foundation. Huge congrats to the winners. And then he has a question to the nominators because he has deep appreciation for them. And so his question is, what might you say to encourage next year's nominators? So any advice for nominators?
Dorothy, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I'll say. I mean, I think the nice thing about this award is that quite often when people get prizes, they're the usual suspects. They're people who've already got prizes for something else. And, you know, the nomination is full of how glorious they are in the traditional way. When you nominate somebody for the Einstein Prize, the criteria are very clearly spelt out. And you really just have to specify how they are improving quality in science. And I can't remember there's like 5 things that you can rate people against. You don't have to tick all 5 boxes, but it's very much a prize for what you have done. So you don't need to already be terribly famous. You don't need to be somebody who has already picked up stashes of awards elsewhere. And the committee, I think I mean, I was on the jury in the early years. And I had the impression it's a very diverse jury, many different disciplines represented, many different nationalities, and senior as well as junior people. So I think you shouldn't just think that it's sort of something that's decided in a funny little smoke-filled room with, well, these days nobody has smoke-filled rooms, but, you know, one of these cabals of white old men. It's not like that at all. So you should be confident that you can nominate somebody and they'll get a fair hearing, even if they're not already famous.
Anything to add, Csaba, from your side?
Well, there is still plenty of people who are doing excellent work in this area. And so there is plenty of choices. You know, I might nominate somebody else next year. I mean, if you just keep nominating. But I mean, I have a different question to maybe all of us, that this is fantastic. Okay. And it's great that, you know, Elisabeth, you are doing what you are doing. And it's great, Brandon, that you set up this site. But is this normal that this type of activity has to be done by, you know, individual people who are outside the system and you know, do it kind of on the side or moonlighting? Why is this not done by the system itself? You know, why are not journals setting up something to do this? Why are not funding agencies? I wrote a lot about this in my book, if anybody wants to read it. Why is it that not the funding agencies doing this? Why does it have to be? Nothing against you, Elisabeth, you are doing great, but why does it have to be people like us doing this? It's not normal. That's all I'm saying. Maybe at one day we'll eventually nominate Elsevier or somebody, but if they decide to, you know, clean up the shop. But in the meantime, you just have to nominate people like Leonid Schneider, or I mean, you know, people who are working at different aspects of the problem.
Helena, would you like to respond to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I went back in the history of science a little bit, again and again and again. And what I've been noticing is that this was always the case. There were new methods, there were new approaches, there were new ways of doing science and gain insights. And what I've, at least for the images, seen again and again, that there were always discussions on what is a valid discussion. There's a really, really, really famous discussion on pictures, whether a photograph is more valid than a drawing, for example. And there's this fantastic story of the person who was watching raindrops fall down. And this is just and back then he was absolutely convinced that the drawing will be much more precise because, you know, it's validated. So we kind of change what is a valid picture and what is a valid documentation over time as the methods develop. And I think institutions are just not flexible enough to address this rapidly, while us as scientists who are working with data every day, we see the problems rapidly, we find solutions, we are agile enough to, you know, to have an initiative that doesn't go through 10 years review process of should or should that not be a professorship. And I think that's why it probably will always be this way, that it will be initiated by individuals, whether they're inside the institution or no longer inside the institution, etc. So
Brandon?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add that for me, it's not that surprising that these issues are here and that we have to police them. I think that with the incentive system that we scientists have created, again, valuing journal name, this is what people are going to try to do to get that journal stamp on them, right? I mean, until we fundamentally change what is valued in science, which is what we're trying to do with PubPeer, it's going to continue like this. If scientists are more motivated on trying to get something published in a high impact journal, there's lots of incentives to tidy things up to make sure it gets into that journal, and not incentives to just produce a solid body of work. And hopefully with PubPeer, we can put that and other initiatives, we can put the focus on the content of the article, and it becomes more valuable to create a solid article than it does to have it just the title nature on it. That is what's going to cause the change, and so I'm not surprised by this that this is happening.
But Brandon, the scientists are not spending their own money to do research. They are spending some funding agencies' money. So it should be essential interest of the funding agencies to prevent all of this. You know, otherwise the money that they are spending is going on irreproducible research. Why aren't they doing something at that level? Is my question.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. But I do think that we scientists can change this if we come together and we put the focus on
in
the
the
article.
meantime, we have to do what we can do if nobody else does it, clearly. So that's how it is.
Well, then let's take the next
Maybe
question.
I can just add a comment of my own to this discussion, because I think, and I'm totally with Brendan with this point, this is about the diagnosis of the problem. And so do we want to eradicate the problem or the disease, or do we want to do therapy? So what the institution, what the funders could do, I mean, this is about a therapy, but not changing the fundamental problem. I think that changing the fundamental problem should be done on our side. This is the researchers. As Brandon said, we have created this monster, this system, and we are the only ones who can change it. I mean, I'm not saying that it's super, that there are, and there in fact are funders who start thinking about those things, that there are institutions who start thinking about it. But I think fundamentally, this needs to be changed from us. But that's sort of my take on it. There is another question from the, in fact, there are several ones. So one is from Deborah Weber-Wolf, and it's specifically directed to Brandon. And the question is, how much effort do you have to invest in moderation of the comments?
So without getting into too many details, I'll say that the moderation is manageable right now. And that's partly due to the fact that users have kind of figured out what are acceptable comments on the site. And we now have great users that not only leave comments that can be whitelisted and require moderation after they have been posted, but also do some of the moderation themselves in signaling to us bad comments that need to come down. So moderation is totally manageable at the moment.
And maybe as a follow-up question, and this not only applies to Brandon, but also the others here, I guess there's a natural question, could you automate some of this? And I mean, we also see, of course, the huge rise of AI in research applications. What do you think about using AI tools and what caveats may come with that, right, in these research integrity and quality assurance tasks? A question to the group.
Well,
Maybe
AI is going to fight AI because on one side, people are starting to use AI to generate fake papers and fake images and whatnot. And on the other side, we're going to have to find ways to automate some of the things because just because of workload. It's going to be very, very complicated. I am really worried about what AI is going to bring when people start to misuse it for the wrong reasons.
The other thing I should add is that the problem one's dealing with is not static. It's very much like trying to eradicate a virus. The virus will mutate. So this is already happening with paper mills, that you find ways of detecting paper mill articles, but the paper millers are a step ahead and they will then behave differently. So I'm not that optimistic about AI solutions. I think that they will probably get bogged down, and I'm also quite worried that they could that they just won't be accurate enough, and that perfectly innocent people may get caught up in, with their papers being blacklisted or whatever. So it's worth a try. But I mean, some people are saying it will solve all the problems. I think you're probably going to need humans all the way through.
And AI is mainly going to do image analysis, and we are not talking about this, but images is only one part of a paper.
Yeah.
I mean, there are papers with no images, there are papers with just data, and then it's much harder to figure out, how much of that is, what kind of data. And if you have a paper which has one image problem, then what do you think about the rest of the paper which doesn't have images? So I'm really worried that we are just kind of scratching the top of the iceberg when we are going after Western blots and immunohistochemistry and these types of things. But again, I don't have a solution. I'm just putting it out there that this is just a very small aspect of what could be problematic with a paper.
Is it safe to generalize and say that quality takes time, and all of your efforts take considerable time and take the time of motivated scientists, back to what Uli said, researchers who need to invest their energy in all of this? And I think that's why all of you are being recognized, that we can't take shortcuts perhaps in this area. Uli, I know you've got a few more questions here.
Sure. I have one from Boris Barbour, and his comment and question is, following on from Dr. Szabo's remarks, maybe Elisabeth and Dorothy could comment on the very encouraging emergence of a valued community of experts.
I can say something about it. I think most of us start to do this work by themselves, like a lonely warrior behind a computer. That's at least how I started. And so I felt pretty isolated in my first couple of years that I was starting to do this. And then you discover that there's other people on I discovered PubPeer, I discovered Paul Brooks's work. And so you see all these people doing the same type of work, and you start to feel, okay, I'm part of a movement. I don't know these people, but then you start to meet them. And I think in the past couple of years, I've met a lot of these sleuths who are working under pseudonyms, that they use to post on PubPeer. And you start to feel there's others like me, and that is just wonderful. And I've met them now in person, several of these people. There's actually a growing community. And even though I still love to work by myself, I just don't work very well in teams. Knowing that other people do the same thing is incredibly encouraging. You just know, okay, occasionally we do work on the same thing. We've worked, for example, with science, with Charles Spiller, who's a science journalist, and he investigated a couple of these cases where we all checked each other's work to make sure that the article that finally came out wasn't just saying something, that several experts had actually evaluated all the concerns we had about certain people's papers. So to work in a team like that, where you evaluate each other's work, is very helpful. You learn from each other. You know that you do a good job, or you also know where you don't do a good job. So it is very valuable to learn from each other and make sure that the concerns we raise are validated by other people. So I'm very happy this is a growing community, and I hope to see more people joining it.
Yes, I would agree. And what I've found just in the recent few months is that you can leverage the fact that quite often sleuths have different areas of expertise. And so if you do have concerns, at the moment, I'm working with somebody who's images, I'm into more the numerical side of things. And together we're picking up far more because we sort of complement each other. And previously we did an analysis. I don't think Deborah Baber-Wolf will mind me mentioning that, there was something that other people found problematic. And then she came in and said, yes, there's also massive plagiarism, so she's her area of expertise. So I think that there's when you sort of put together the different areas of expertise from different sleuths, we are getting quite formidable, shall we say. So, and that's rather enjoyable.
And I think that can be said about all of the initiatives here, that quality and community clearly go hand in hand in each of your projects. And I'm just glad that you are part of our community of scientists at large. And thank you for sharing your time with all of us. It's unfortunately already time to end our conversation. So I need to turn things over now to Uli for some final remarks, but I wanted to thank you from my side for this very interesting conversation today.
Yeah, so also from my side, a very heartfelt thank you to all our speakers, and especially also to Jess for moderating and for driving a very insightful conversation. So we also want to express our sincere appreciation to you, the audience, for your time, your presence, and the great questions that were asked. If you know someone doing groundbreaking work in research quality, please feel free to share this award with them or even nominate them, or simply let us know about them. The next call for entries opens in January 2025. Help us spread the word and support this important initiative. Have a nice day or evening, and do the right thing. So, bye-bye.